Delighted to say that Nick Ferrari joins us from his studio at LBC. Morning to you, Nick. Lovely to see you. Happy New Year.
Good morning.
And great to have you here in the studio with us, Ashley, as well. I wonder, Nick, what you make of what Celia Walden's been writing about and the lack of grit that we have as Brits when the snow comes. We need a bit of fire horse energy, according to her. Our response to what happens when the snow comes, she describes as a national embarrassment.
Yes, this is a great Celia Walden writing in today's Daily Telegraph, and she refers to the time she was living over in New York, where I've lived as well. New Yorkers somehow get on with their lives. They took buses and trains that somehow worked despite inches of snow. Did anyone mention the weather? Nope. There are two schools of thought here. One, I do think that possibly we are too quick to close some schools. Now, if there's danger for the children, if they can't get through the gate, of course, but a little degree of resilience isn't a bad thing in younger people. And I do think sometimes railway lines possibly close when they don't need to. But to defend airports, and we point out that, for instance, John Lennon Airport in Liverpool has been closed, as has Aberdeen and Edinburgh. Well, we looked at that yesterday, and the cost of some of that kit, Ben and Kat and Ashley, is like £350,000 for some of those tractors and some of those snow clearers. And you might use it twice a year at maximum. Now, here's a better image. There we are. I think this is great. And providing that child shouldn't be at school and isn't playing truant, we celebrate that. And that's great. And good luck to them. If they should be at school, then the teacher might have something to say. But we go most years where we don't have this sort of snow. Are you going to say we should be spending, at some airports, £1 million on kit you will never use? That's the conundrum they face.
It's often the accusation that's levelled at our infrastructure, Ashley, as Nick was just saying, that why can't we cope? Why can't we cope? We have a little flurry of snow, but it's not consistent and it's not every single year.
Well, I sort of do agree with Celia says that I do think it's a national embarrassment, but not on us as Brits, but on our public services. I mean, our public services don't even work when it's sunny, so why would I expect them to work when it's snowy? I think in the long term, of course it would be cheaper to be able to buy the equipment and the infrastructure that we need, but obviously government's only thinking 4 years, so they're not going to do something that benefits long term, because the amount of cost and disruption is going to be far greater long term. But I think it says more about, I mean, the fact that we don't fund our NHS, our schools, there's potholes on every road in the country, and that's for weather that is everyday weather. So, yeah, I just don't know how we expect to be able to fund snowy days. But I do think it is embarrassing, and I think this conversation comes up every time it snows. But I think in terms of, like, shutting down schools, maybe we are over-cautious, but also remember we have an NHS that is stretched and underfunded. So I think sometimes you do have to make a call to keep people safe, and I'm certainly grateful that we don't have rail accidents. Should we improve the infrastructure on the rail lines? Absolutely. Are we going to? Probably not. Would I prefer people to be safe, especially in an environment where you can work from home? 100%.
Go on, Nick.
This is a historic day. This is a new start to a new year. Ashley and I agree on something, and we should celebrate this day, January the 6th. Let the word go forward that we agreed on one thing.
Do you know
but
why
coming
that
to you,
is,
Ben,
Nick?
and I'm sure the girls, you play football as well, but just me to Ben.
Yeah.
Some of the best football I ever played at school was actually in the snow. When you heft the ball as far as you approach it and it only travels. Those are great days at school when we used to have the field covered in snow and we try and play football. Surely you're the same, everybody, at your school.
Unquestionably.
I remember waking up on those snow days where you'd wake up and you'd still be in bed and the light would be a little bit pink and you go, has it snowed?
Yeah.
Has it snowed? Are we not going to school? And you'd rush to the curtains and open them and you'd be like, yeah, no school today.
I do have to apologise to everyone because my son did manifest this weather because he said to me just 3 days ago when I said it's not Christmas anymore, and he said, but why hasn't it snowed? And he really didn't understand, because obviously all the films he watches at Christmas, it snows.
Of course
and
it is.
I said, well, sometimes it doesn't snow. Next day snow. So apologies to everyone.
What do you know?
There you go.
Yeah.
It's done. OK, let's talk about driving reforms and if they go far enough. Drivers over the age of 70 will face compulsory eye tests in a shake-up of the government's road safety strategy. Can you tell us a bit more about the changes, Nick?
Yes, this is the biggest shake-up since Tony Blair was in power in 2006, so it's some 20 years. There are three main areas, Kat. You've referenced one of them. Eyesight tests more regularly for those over 70. They're also looking at bringing down the level of alcohol. Now, it's very difficult and very dangerous to say because it's down to the body weight, but typically now, the average man, once they've got above half a pint and going towards a pint, that's when they've reached their limit. Broadly speaking, don't take that as medical advice, but they're looking at bringing that one down, and also penalty points for not wearing your seatbelts. Again, on the show, we've talked to the AA quite comprehensively about this. Let's possibly stay with the one that got a lot of phone calls here on LBC, which is the idea of more eye tests for drivers over 70. And the graph will show you there is, as regards people involved in, and sadly sometimes dying from RTAs or road traffic accidents, there's a very distinct U, Kat. There's the 17 to 21 age group. Typically, they're getting in cars possibly for the first time. They don't have the level of experience, and sadly, too many of them either have an accident or tragically they die. And we're talking about around roughly 1,600 people, or 1,633 people per annum, across both age groups. And then it's the over 85s. I stress the over 85s. So at the age of 70, should we be coming down as hard? I think the age of 80, yes, you probably should be looking at having your eyes tested more regularly. But we spoke with loads of people who are in their late 60s and in their early 70s who say it's going to be quite an onerous chore on them. But if it leads to road safety, the campaigners say it has to be done.
Ashley, Nick just mentioned there, we wanted to find out the exact percentages of people that were involved in crash versus young versus older. 12% of all casualties in car crashes involved older drivers, probably because they drive a bit more slowly, I'm guessing, whereas 22% of fatalities on Britain's roads involved a young person behind the wheel. Do you think we're doing enough both ends of the spectrum?
I think we could always do more, and actually I think eye tests could be across the board, something that we expect, because I know I got laser eye surgery over a decade ago and I haven't had an eye test since. It is on my list. This new year it's going to happen.
We've all got them, Ashley.
But if I were to go behind the wheel, I don't know if my eyes are as good as they could be. So I wouldn't be against having to have... Because also it's good for all our health to have eye tests anyway. I think my area of concern, and I really feel for elderly people, I have relatives who perhaps shouldn't be behind the wheel, but it's their only way to get out and about. And I feel like if there were minibuses, especially for people in more isolated areas, we know that there's already a problem with loneliness, especially amongst the elderly. If there was a way for them to still have a lifeline where they can get out and about in the community. But I feel for people, because if you're starting to crack down, as you should, 100% from a road safety perspective. And by the way, I really welcome the change to the drink driving as well, because my dad was a firefighter, and so he went to so many road accidents. And we have a zero drinking policy.
It's easier, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, I feel for people who... The reason lots of elderly people might not come forward and self-diagnose or self-test, is because they're so scared to have their vehicle taken away from them, because then they're even more isolated. Yeah,
there's a concern with that, but if there is an issue, whether it's with their eyesight, Nick, or should we be testing the driving as well? What's been really interesting, and you will, of course, because we have your stepson and my son are good mates, they're at that age where they're all learning to drive, and suddenly when you're going out with a young driver again and you're remembering actually what is involved in passing a driving test, you realise how many bad habits that we get into as well. Should we be testing people's driving ability, not just their eyesight?
On paper, Ben, it makes utter sense. In practicality, it's how we can do that. You will have many people watching your show now, and their mums and dads and their grandparents. We haven't got enough examiners as there are for mostly young people to take their tests. They're having to have a look. The idea that we might have to have someone who could just, I don't know, watch me reverse around a corner or do a hill start or whatever it might be. Of course, on paper, that makes sense. Absolutely. But in practicality, and another point you make, Ben, and this is because we took a call from a number of optometrists or opticians. And what's quite frightening is, and one said, I had someone whose eyesight was really, really bad, and I said, you will have to inform the authorities, the DVLA or DVLC, whatever it's calling itself this week. And they said, oh, yes, I will. And the optician, I know that they weren't going to do it, but there's no duty on me to report Nick Ferrari should not be behind the wheel because his eyesight has failed so drastically. So people go for those eye tests, they're told the news they don't want to hear, and then they don't have their licence taken away. So it's just self-defeating in that sense, Ben.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? We are one of only 3 European countries that rely on self-reporting for serious eye diseases. So even if you get told, as you were saying, Nick, if the optometrist says, look, you really shouldn't be driving, unless that person reports themselves, they don't actually have to do it.
Seems astonishing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
OK, let's move on to our next talking point. And this is an interesting one because we've been talking about fat jabs sort of weekly across the whole of the last year. I'm sure you have on your show as well. But interesting points coming out that men, in theory, should be allowed to jump the queue for these fat jabs. I know Dr. Zoe is in the studio for us right now. So, Zoe, explain how the system works at the moment and why the suggestion is that men should be able to jump the queue and get priority.
So if we're thinking about the NHS, in order to qualify for weight loss injections on the NHS at the moment, it's very strict criteria. Your BMI needs to be 40 or above if you're white. If you're black or South Asian or from certain other ethnic groups, then 37.5 equivalent. And you also need to have 4 out of the following 5 weight loss-related conditions. So type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high lipids, that's cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, obstructive sleep apnea. You have to have 4 of the 5. So it's very, very tight, and it's going to open up a little bit more in June this year. So this call for men to be prescribed at a lower BMI than women, I think the experts who are saying this, they're comparing... You know, we know that people who are from those minority ethnic groups get the complications of obesity at a lower BMI, partly due to where we store body on our fat. So black people, for example, tend to store less under their skin, more in their viscera, in their abdominal cavity, which is a harmful place. So they're basing on that, saying, well, actually, men, it's similar with men compared to women. Women are more likely to have more subcutaneous fat and less visceral fat for the same BMI. So should this adjustment be made? So it's a valid argument that needs to be researched. There isn't research there available at the moment to see, but straight away there are some combative statements. For example, when women reach menopause, then their risk accelerates. In certain ethnic groups, particularly there's some research from China saying that actually women have a higher risk of heart attacks than men at the same BMI. And what we also have to consider is if we're thinking about cardiovascular risks, and men have a higher risk of a heart attack than women at the same BMI, but if you're a woman who has a heart attack, you're twice as likely to die than a man from that heart attack because it's less likely to be diagnosed correctly and you're likely to receive substandard care. So as with anything in health, it's way more complicated than it first seems. But, you know, let's see the research. Somebody needs to do the research first.
It's an interesting question, this, Nick, isn't it? Because I've definitely noticed a lot more of my male friends that I play golf with of a certain age that I've reached, talking about the fact that they are starting to do it. But a lot of female friends, a lot of the guests that we've had on this show, women have been very open about the fact that they've been taking some of the weight loss jabs. Is that something that you've come across as well? I don't know what your listeners react to that.
Yeah. And I'd be really interested if I can ask Zoe, Dr. Zoe, because we've just discussed this, and there's a lot, and I want to see what Doctor thinks. A lot of people call into question the validity of BMI. I appreciate it's the measure that we use, but they cite some examples. For instance, Ben, you'll appreciate that. The entire England rugby squad are obese, according to their BMI, right? But you try and outrun, even you, Ben, try and outrun any one of them.
BMI, I would be considered obese for my BMI. My weight to height ratio means that I'm obese.
So to Zoe, I mean, should we be basing so much of this on BMI?
BMI is absolutely not ideal, and that's always the example, isn't it? The England rugby team are all obese, but they know that their obesity is because they've got a lot of muscle on their body, so they're not going to be concerned about it. And actually, the majority of people who have healthy obesity because they're carrying a lot of muscle on their body, they're very aware of that fact. The vast majority of people who have a BMI over 30, over 95% are at risk because of it. However, you're right, BMI is not great. Comparing your height to your waist circumference is better, but when they've studied that and talked about shifting that, because you then depend upon people to measure their own waist circumference, it's often done so inaccurately that it can be completely wrong. So we do need a better... In an ideal world, each individual will be assessed on their own parameters, and you'd put them on a scanner and you'd be able to calculate their body fat and see where they store their fat. But at the moment, for practical reasons, we haven't been able to get better than BMI, but we do need to.
BMI aside as well, though, actually, the idea, I mean, it sticks in my jaw a little bit, the idea that men should be getting priority for this over women. And I imagine that you feel
I'm sure
similar.
You know how I feel about this. And before I say what I'm going to say, this is not an anti-men statement, but I believe in equity, and I believe that healthcare should be based on needs and fairness and not on gender. And when we talk about when you look at women's healthcare, women already lose out massively in healthcare. We know there's a gender pain gap. We know that women are more likely to be misdiagnosed, under-researched, or told it's just our hormones because there has not been enough research on women's bodies. We are more likely to die in medicine because medicine was built and tested on male bodies. So the idea now that men should jump the queue in a system where women are already losing out, but also if we look at why women are coming forward more for these weight loss jabs. I have my own thoughts on the weight loss jabs anyway, where we're prioritising skinniness over health. But it's because of the double standards around bodies. We know that men are less likely, it said in the article, that dad bods are seen as cooler than a mum bod. That just sums it up for me, that the woman is the one who gives birth, and yet she is put under pressure to lose weight. And it's a societal thing. We live in a very fat-phobic society, and the pressure on women, which we see in magazines, and even when we look at programmes like Friends, there is, like, Fat Monica, where women have so much more pressure and we're judged for weight more. So I think that we should be encouraging men to seek help, but not by pushing women backwards.
Yeah. I think it's really... my anecdotally, what's really positive is the amount of my male friends that are actually talking about it openly and trying to do something about it, whereas before they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But
I also do feel like weight loss jabs are becoming the new Weight Watchers. Like, there is definitely a need for them, but I just worry that we still don't know the long-term impact on our health.
We're going to have to leave it there. Ashley, Nick, thank you. We'll see you in the studio shortly, Nick.
Thank you.
It's just a little walk for you now, isn't it, from Leicester Square?
Yeah, just to pick up on the Friends line, can I say we're on a break? That's what we say now.